very important panel because in many ways the foundations of the democracy that we have were laid by Nehruji. I just was talking to a television journalist who asked about the seminar, and I pointed out that if it weren't for the foundations laid by Nehruji, Narendra Modi ji would not be Prime Minister today, and that maybe the government of India should recognize what has happened and how it's been possible. The fact is that Nehruji was a convinced Democrat from the very beginning. It's interesting that way back in 1936, before independence, but at the time when he had just campaigned across the country for the government to be first more or less free elections in India under the Government of India Act, and he had acquired a massive, massive audiences everywhere, a lot of regulation, a lot of following. An anonymous article appeared in the Calcutta magazine, The Modern Review, saying that this fellow Jawaharlal Nehru is getting very serious airs and delusions of grandeur. He must be checked. We want no Caesars, quote unquote. Only later did it emerge that this anonymous article had been authored by Jawaharlal Nehru himself. In other words, he was partly, of course, keeping himself in check, but partly letting the people who thought about politics in our country understand that whatever following he was acquiring, whatever mass leadership pretensions were being ascribed to him, that he wanted to pursue them within a framework of democracy, that he was not interested in becoming a Caesar, that this was not the way he would like to proceed with the country. And when he became Prime Minister, first of all, a few months before independence, an interim government, and thereafter after independence, his instincts remained always that of a Democrat. You've seen some of those very interesting quotes in the slideshow that were shown to us just before this panel began. And the quotes lay out in many ways a lot of the basic principles that lay behind his advocacy of democracy in our country. The other thing worth noting is that many have criticized him for having ruled 17 years and not made way sooner for somebody else to take over while he was still alive, etc. It is often overlooked that he actually had decided to leave the prime ministership after 10 years. And after 57 elections, he actually tendered his resignation. And he was met with such a groundswell of protest, not only from within the party, which you may say is not surprising, but even from world leaders from Eisenhower to Bulganin, wrote to him saying, the world cannot afford to lose you at this time, we must continue. And so rather reluctantly, because his fantasy had been to go off and spend the next 6 months trekking in his beloved Kashmiri Himalayas, he cut that down to a 3-week trek instead of a 6-month trek, and he returned to office. After that, these episodes are often forgotten, but he was not somebody who wanted to cling on to power for its own sake. The other thing worth pointing out is that whenever he was crossed or there was serious disagreement with his policies, including within the cabinet, because certainly the tradition of dissent, of freedom of expression, as Mukul Vasniji just explained, was strong within the party, within the government, within the cabinet. His instinct always, when people disagreed with him, was to offer to resign. He usually got his way, the critics backed down. But the point is, this is not the instinct of a dictator, but that of a Democrat. This was somebody who said, fine, you want to do it differently from me? Don't ask me to lead the government. You go ahead and do it, I'm leading. And they said, no, please stay. We'll change our policies. That was the way in which he conducted himself. So I tend to be very impatient with those who suggest that there's something undemocratic about either his long tenure or his kind of rule. Don't forget that after Gandhiji died, within 2 years, Sardar Patel died, there really was no challenge to Nehru of any significant nature from any leader of comparable stature in the country. Had he wanted to, he could have gone the way of so many other post-colonial leaders in developing countries. Nyerere to Nkrumah, all amassed colossal personal power. What did Nehruji do? Exactly the opposite. His idea was that the nation must understand that institutions are more important than individuals. So he would very much go out of his way to pay public respect to the president and even the largely ceremonial vice president in public in order to show that these individuals outranked him in the country's constitutional structure. It was something he did repeatedly and as a matter of habit. He ensured that the judiciary's independence was recognized as a vital part of our democracy. As you know, sometimes he had a short temper. On one occasion at a press conference, he said something somewhat intemperate about a judge. As soon as the press conference over, he realized that what he had done was wrong. He immediately issued a public apology to the judge himself and then wrote an abject letter to the Chief Justice of India apologizing, unbidden, for having insulted the judiciary. Now what is the purpose? He didn't need to do this. The judge would not have demanded it. Chief Justice would not have demanded it. He did it because he felt that he was undermining his own project of strengthening these institutions by acting as if the Prime Minister of India had the right to criticize a judge. I mean, think about the ways in which these lessons were imparted. Parliament, especially after the 52 and 57 elections, the opposition were numerically extremely weak, weaker than they are today in terms of numbers. But Nehruji insisted that the opposition be given due deference and due respect, out of all proportion to their numbers. He personally attended Parliament all the time that it was in session, and he insisted that his ministers and senior civil servants do the same. He made sure that questions were answered. All the traditions of Parliament that we value and cherish today, however much they may now be breached, were laid down because the Prime Minister of the day, the first Prime Minister of independent India, set that example. And he set it again because he said in a democracy, this is the supreme institution, we must give it the respect it deserves, and the opposition, he's the one who went out of his way to value the opposition, to respond to the arguments, and he encouraged members of his own party to speak against him when necessary. Many of you will remember a number of famous episodes. His own son-in-law, Feroz Gandhi, attacking the government on a number of issues and bringing about the resignation of the finance minister. No point did Nehruji crack the whip and expel him from the party or anything like that. He accepted this as part of the price of democracy. And he would often say, I'd rather uphold democracy and lose an election or lose office or lose a position than challenge democracy by doing what some might otherwise do, that is, having his own way by insisting that his view must prevail. Startling in many, many ways. His respect for Parliament went right up. In fact, many will remember the debates over China and the lead up to the 62 war. In many ways, people feel that a lot of his actions were in response to what he was hearing in Parliament, that he felt impelled to do certain things because of the public temper. Again, the instincts of a democrat, not an authoritarian. One final example, I know there are a lot of panelists waiting to speak. He used to write these letters to the chief minister. Now remember, ours was an incipient federal polity. The boundaries between state and centre had not been effectively tested. No question that had Nehruji wanted, he could have ridden roughshod over the states. And certainly in later eras, we've seen how state chief ministers were essentially appointed by Delhi rather than by the support base they had developed in their own states. Nehruji insisted not only in encouraging the state parties and the state governments to elect their own leadership, but he also treated them with respect as independent power centers in their own right. And his letters, which have been compiled in a 4-volume collection some years ago by G. Parthasarathy, and for those of you who don't have the time for it, there's a wonderful little 1-volume book that came out less than a year ago, edited by Madhav Khosla, showing his extracts from many of these letters. They're a marvelous education in civics and democracy, because he is writing to people as equals. He's writing, sometimes his tone is preachy, sometimes it is reverential, sometimes it is defensive, but he is writing to these chief ministers as Prime Minister to show that I'm accountable to the people of India, but I'm also accountable to the states. And I'm accountable to you all as the leaders of your states for what I'm trying to do in our system. Now this is the kind of democracy, the foundations of which Nehruji laid in the 17 years. let's be very clear and recognize that it could easily have gone another way. And that in country after country that came to power at the end of colonial rule, it did go the other way, including in our neighbors, Pakistan notably. Nehruji and his long stint ensured that democracy was given such a stable footing that there was never any serious doubt that the system had taken enough root to be able to ensure that it would survive. And as you know, when he passed away at a time when American journalist Wallace Hagen had even written a book called After Nehru Who? And one of his chapters had been about the possibility of military rule in India. When he passed away, there was no question. The Congress Party rallied round, voted a successor. When he passed away 2 years later, the same thing happened again. And the party, the country, continued to function democratically. So that, as we know, we have now seen so many changes of power, so many transfers from one party to another, from one coalition to another in Delhi and in the States. And at no point has there been any serious doubt that whoever was in office would respect the verdict of the people. That really, in many ways, was entirely thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru. He was asked by the American editor Norman Cousins, the numbers obviously changed. He was asked sometime in the 1950s, what do you want to be your legacy to India? And he said, 300 million people capable of governing themselves. Well, as you know, we've gone almost 1 billion beyond that number. But thanks to Nehruji, thanks to the foundations he laid for us, thanks to what we have been able to build on those foundations, we have demonstrated to ourselves and to the world that we are indeed capable of governing ourselves. Thank you very much.